Hey everybody, I'm Jesse, and welcome to another edition of Gen X Thinks. And today we have a subscriber-inspired edition. Today's subject was suggested by Kalish Matriarch, and we're going to talk about the Satanic Panic of the 1980s and 90s, and how it affected us, and how those effects have carried throughout our lives, and even into today. But before I get into that, I'd like to invite you to go check out a friend of mine, Just Another Guy in the Woods. He's got a pretty cool channel here on YouTube, and I invite you to go check him out. Give him your support as well. He's got an interesting channel, one of the smartest guys I've ever had the pleasure of talking to. So please go check him out. Just Another Guy in the Woods. And I'll leave his channel link down in the description. And tomorrow we have another subscriber-inspired edition. Tomorrow morning I'm going to be talking about the AIDS epidemic and what it was like growing up through that during our formative years and our coming of age in the middle of an AIDS epidemic, and how that experience has carried throughout our lives, and how we dealt with it and are still dealing with the ramifications of it today. So be sure and check that out tomorrow. But back to the topic at hand, the Satanic Panic. Now, as we all know, a lot of us anyway, the entire thing was about, it was a fear that had ripped through the United States anyway, maybe a lot of Western civilization, but especially the United States. A fear had taken hold of these satanic cults performing rituals and abuse on children. That was the point of the whole thing, right? And parents and people at large were really afraid. And several things led up to this panic, led up to this fear. One of the major inciters of this panic was a book that was published in 1980 called Michelle Remembers. Psychotherapist, a psychoanalyst or something, had taken this woman, Michelle, and regressed her through hypnotherapy, hypnotized her, and coaxed a lot of this stuff out of her, how she had been terrorized and abused by some satanic cult, right? The book was a smash hit, a bestseller. Basically, in today's terminology, it went viral. And that is what kind of instigated the whole thing. That is a major contributing factor to the entire Satanic Panic. Since then, and that started in the early 90s, was the discrediting of all this. Because the hypnotherapist can ask leading questions while the subject is under, what was he wearing a black robe? Yeah, he was wearing a black robe. Did it have a pentagram on it? Oh yeah, there was a pentagram on it. Was there a pentagram on the floor too? Yeah, there was a pentagram on the floor. This kind of stuff, instead of just asking, the subject to relate what they see, they're leading and injecting images into the subject's head with words. So that kind of got discredited in the 90s, but through the entire decade of the 80s, this entire thing kind of caught fire, right? And another contributing factor of the Satanic Panic was this guy and his ilk, right? You remember this guy, Jimmy Swaggart, and the other televangelists like him. They were fear-mongering. They were really big in the 80s. I remember, I think it was Oral Roberts or one of those, that they basically told their audience that God was going to kill them. They didn't word it like that, but they said God was going to take them home or something, or call them back home or some shit like that. But basically, God was going to kill them unless their audience sent them $1 million. And the audience did. Here's the thing that'll blow your mind if you don't remember it. the audience sent them the $1 million. So they came back up on their next show and said, well, we got the $1 million, but God has raised the price. Now he wants 1.3 million or 1.4 or whatever the number was. But God had raised it after the people had sent him the amount God requested. Then he saw how easy it was. So God got up the ante, up the demand, right? So yeah. But it's just hard to believe that people fell for that shit. But anyway, they did. And this freaking guy, Jimmy Swaggart, I remember in high school, a kid I knew, his name was Danny. I can't remember his last name, but he had this exact picture up in the inside of his high school locker. And I remember looking at that picture and what that picture said to me, not necessarily the picture itself, but just the fact that Danny had ripped it out and put it up in his locker. It pointed to the fact that, that we knew, our eyes were open, us kids, us high schoolers, us Gen Xers, we saw them for what they were. And not just the televangelists or the religious people, whatever, the whole system, the government, the corporations, the greed, the everything. We saw the hypocrisy and the lies for what they were back then. And I remember looking at this image in high school, walking down the hall and walking up to Danny's locker and seeing that, and that resonated with me. Because we saw through their lies. Even at that young age, we knew what they were. And that still sticks with me in my head whenever I see this guy or hear anything about televangelists or any of that. I remember seeing that picture hanging up in Danny's locker. So yeah, then these guys did a lot of fear mongering. That was what they were about. They made a fortune off of the Satanic Panic. That's just what, a lot of Christians, a lot of people became Christians because of the fear. They scared a bunch of people into donating money to them, and I mean a bunch of people, millions upon millions of dollars. These televangelists were living in mansions, literally living in mansions, just because, they had millions upon millions of people sending them $20, $30 a year. Some of them would probably send them thousands of dollars. So, yeah, these guys here, Jimmy Swaggart and his ilk, were a major contributor to the Satanic Panic. And another contributor to the Satanic Panic was just the media at large. Of course, you can't talk about fear mongering without talking about the media, right? They are the fear mongers of fear mongers. They've been fear mongering us from about nuclear war, ice ages, global warming, killer bees, Y2K. The list goes on, and in that list is Satanic Panic, the Satanic Panic. They talked about the supposed satanic cults that were infiltrating our society and taking over. And I'm sure there were some satanic cults. There are probably some satanic cults out there now, right? But they made it into this huge thing that people needed to be afraid of. And to be up on that and to beat that fear, you had to tune into their channel and become more afraid, right? That's what it ended up being. They just kept compounding the fear. A lot of people made a lot of money off of the Satanic Panic. And that is something that a lot of us have overlooked. And it boils down to the dollar. If they're making money off of it, they're gonna perpetuate it. They're gonna continue it. They're not gonna stop making money. They're gonna keep the fear rolling. And during the 80s, see, there was a big shift going on that started kind of in the 70s and really took hold in the 80s, was women going to work. Women started going to work in large numbers in the 80s, right? It really started to become a common thing. So daycare centers started becoming more and more common. They started becoming actual things. Before that, daycare centers weren't really a thing. I mean, they might have had some. Most people would probably take their kids to a church or something, to like a Sunday school thing, and drop them off for a few hours or something, and somebody would watch them there, or just have a relative come over and watch their kids for them if they had to leave their kids alone. There really weren't daycare centers prior to the 70s and 80s. And they didn't really become a real thing until the 80s. So, and this whole Satanic Panic thing kind of focused on daycare centers. They were a new thing, and they were questionable. People weren't real comfortable with them, leaving their kids with strangers, you know. But they didn't have a choice because they had to go to work. So the thing with that is that a lot of lawsuits, I think, the biggest, or at the very least one of the biggest trials and most expensive trials in American history happened back then against a daycare center that was accused of using children in satanic rituals, and that was the McMartin preschool case. No evidence was found. It was just fear and I don't know what other motives were involved in bringing this preschool to into court and trying to convict these people of crimes. But they were eventually exonerated. But still, after you've been seen on TV for months or years, or I don't know how long the case drug on, and accused of abusing children for satanic rituals, I can just imagine, you know, the social impact it had on these people's lives. But there was a whole lot of that. People were accused of things that they just didn't do. There was no evidence of it, but it was such a cultural and social hysteria that the judges would see these things through, right? And even convict innocent people. It was really crazy. But people were going to jail for being satanic cult child abusers who didn't have anything to do with the satanic cult. They had nothing, never would have dream of abusing a kid. But you take your kid's having problems, and you take them to a psychiatrist or whatever, a psychoanalyst or whatever it is, and they lay him down, they hypnotize the kid, and then start asking the kid leading questions, with people in black robes and knives and candles and shit, and you're going to get the answers you're looking for. But back then, the psychoanalysts were caught up in that hysteria too, that they were looking for that. It would get them in the paper, it would get them noticed, it would make them money. So they were looking for this. I mean, I'm not saying I'm sure some of them did, but I'm not saying all of them purposefully planted this stuff in this kid's head and these kids' heads. But when you're looking for something, a certain thing, you're more apt to find it even if it's not there. You know what I'm saying? Especially in that kind of situation where your only evidence is hearsay, something that someone else said. But that was a major thing that happened. Was a lot of people were convicted of crimes that they never committed. They didn't have anything to do with it, and there never was a crime. It was just, they hypnotized a kid, and the kid said what they wanted to hear under hypnosis. So yeah, that was a bad chapter in our lives, in our history, Gen X, and a lot of us were the kids, right? So that it was just a bad time with a lot of fear mongering and whatnot, and that continuing into today, we still kind of have that fear mongering. It's shifted a little bit, but not to disparage the guy. But look at Alex Jones. He's constantly railing about, Satanists and satanic cults, and basically he's a fearmonger. And not to say that I don't watch the guy. I watch the guy. He's all right. He's got some good stuff to say too. But he does a lot of fear mongering, and he does a lot of asking for money to combat this satanic cult that none of us have ever seen, right? But people send him a bunch of money, just like the televangelists back in the 80s. So it has kind of perpetuated. It is still alive today, just on a more subdued level. Now, I do not believe that he should have been silenced and canceled and all that. I just believe people should have enough sense to watch him and decide for themselves. Make a good decision. Until I see, a bunch of Satanists walking down the street, grabbing kids off, and snatching them into vans or whatever, I'm going to be skeptical about some satanic cult that's fighting a spiritual war. I'm not to say that they're not there. I'm not buying into it enough to where I'm going to send some dude a bunch of money, a bunch of my hard-earned money to fight this spiritual war. You know what I'm saying? I can't do that. And a lot of that fear mongering, people learned from that, how much money is to be made from fear, right? And this is just perpetuated into today. Some of the fear and the fear mongering is justified, I mean, look at Alex Jones. A lot of the stuff he talks about is legitimate stuff. I have legitimate concerns about this stuff, But in order to make money, he's got to fearmonger a little bit. Well, he fearmongers a lot, but I mean, he's got to do some fearmongering in order to make money with the message he's putting out there. And I know I'm picking on Alex Jones here, but that's not really my point in this part of the conversation, is to pick on him because it's more widespread than him. There's a lot of fear mongering out there. Our media still fear mongers today, just like it always has. It hasn't pulled back on the gas at all. It's still pedal to the metal with the fear mongering. They just hop around from subject to subject, right? We were afraid of drugs, the war on drugs. We heard about that on the media constantly until it was switched over to the war on terror. And then it switched over to the war on Trump and all this. So yeah, now they're hyping people up and trying to scare people of Trump and Elon Musk. That's what they're focused on now. But whatever. It's all fear mongering, and it's all, I think most of it should be ignored. Most of that fear mongering should be ignored, in my personal opinion. And make sure you get down in the comments and let me know what you think. What are your memories of the Satanic Panic? Were you one of those kids who got hypnotized? Anything you remember from back then, please put it in the comments, or any views you have about how it is brought forward into our lives today. Put that down in the comments, please. I'm really interested to see how y'all remember and what y'all think of the Satanic Panic. As far as Gen X, that Satanic Panic thing really made us skeptical, okay? Because we saw all this and we grew up through all this. And then in the early 90s, they actually did some investigations. They started digging into this stuff in a bigger way, and they found out that it was all bullshit, right? There was no evidence for any of it. People were incarcerated for no reason. All these televangelists were up there screaming at us and fear-mongering for no reason. There was nothing to be afraid of. People we had seen grown-ups be sending them money this whole time for, and they were just bullshitting. So this whole Satanic Panic thing, I think, is one of the major reasons why Gen X is so skeptical, okay, to this day. And that has stuck with us. We do not believe the bullshit. And that is why, because we lived through that at a young age. And I think that people don't really consider how much these things have effect on you and the rest of your life when they happen at a young age, right? When they happen when you're young. That whole satanic panic thing really made us skeptical. And in a religious way, it did. I know it did me, because it made me skeptical of religion. I have to point out that in the beginning, it made me skeptical of all religion. I just equated religion with all of that, right? Now, later on, as I grew up, I began to realize that there was a difference between organized religion that is run by people who are greedy and duplicitous and hypocritical, and just, an individual being religious. But I eventually did realize that it was organized religion that I was skeptical of. And I'm not trying to turn this into a religious thing, but the Satanic Panic is a religious thing. So I'm not trying to make this about my individual religious beliefs and all that. But I must, by necessity, talk about religion in a video about the Satanic Panic, right? Because it did a really strange thing. It pulled a lot of people into Christianity. It made people into Christians that weren't. And it also pushed a lot of people away from Christianity, because we saw that hysteria and that fear mongering, and we didn't like it. We weren't into that shit, right? It made us skeptical. It made us question things that had to do with religion. And when we were younger, it had us questioning things that had to do with all religion, just religion, or maybe just a Christian religion, however you were. But we just questioned it all. Now we were raised to believe certain things, but this whole Satanic Panic scenario led us to question this stuff. And the televangelist, especially in my life, in my mind, in my experience, those fearmongers really made me question the whole thing, right? Because it ended up that I think Jimmy Swaggart ended up being convicted of a felony, and they were just, they got caught with cocaine and hookers and in hotel rooms and stuff. They were all just disgusting hypocrites. Not saying cocaine and hookers is disgusting, but I'm just saying that they were disgusting hypocrites. The hypocrite is the part of it is disgusting, especially when you're up there pretending to be a righteous, moral example for everyone. You're supposed to be this, you're holding yourself up, propping yourself up, building yourself up to be this great moral example for the world. Then it turns out you're just a scumbag. Not only are you, in a hotel room with cocaine and hookers, but you're stealing from your people, from your constituents, your audience. You're just fleecing them. And that's another thing, that we not only did we watch all these televangelists fleecing their audience, but we watched their audience lining up to be fleeced. And I remember that when I was in my mid-teens, and I remember watching people sending these morons money, and I just could not believe it. I'm just like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you doing this? That dude doesn't need your money. He lives in a mansion. I mean, a mansion, not a small mansion, a big one with gold sinks, literally Donald Trump style mansion, gold all over the place and shit. It turned us away from religion a lot, or it turned us to religion. It seemed like it was one or the other, that whole Satanic Panic thing. So it made us very devout Christians, or we completely rejected Christianity one way or the other. Now, a lot of us have since then found our own path back to religion in a way that we're comfortable with, and in a way that, that is beyond the hypocrisy of the organization, right? There's no, we kind of just did away with the organization part of it, the hypocrisy, the greed, and all that, separated ourselves from that, but took the religion out of that and adopted that, okay, on our own. Which, in that way, the people that have done that, I think found a happy medium, maybe, just in my own opinion. But it definitely had an impact. We would not be the same without that satanic panic, without have lived through that through our formative years. And that it was a very important part of our lives. And even the things that we saw, like the televangelists and the court cases and stuff, even if we just saw them as individual happenings and didn't notice the connection back then, we didn't notice the connection to the Satanic Panic, but they were there, and it was a broader thing. Now that we look back in hindsight, we can see the broad picture, but back then it wasn't like that. Not for me anyway. In summary, the Satanic Panic did have a major impact on Generation X. Some for the good, some for the worse. Some of us came out of it worse for the wear. Some of us came out of it pretty good. I myself came out of it worse, but eventually I think I got through that and came to it. It led me to a better place, I believe. Like everything, all of our struggles, we learn from them, and hopefully we come out on the other end better than if we had never gone through them. Okay? And that's what I believe happened to Generation X with the Satanic Panic. Yes, it wasn't a good experience, and a lot of us made decisions based on that entire situation happening back then, and formulated ideas, but eventually we added and subtracted from those ideas and came to something that as full-grown adults that we're comfortable with, and we like who we are now. So I really think that's something that everybody needs to realize, that our struggles are part of us. Our history, no matter how difficult, personal history, no matter how difficult it was, times were hard, we made bad decisions, but without those bad decisions having been made, we wouldn't be the people we are today, right? Without having lived through that and gained that knowledge, and maybe the knowledge we gained and the decisions we made right in the middle of and right after the Satanic Panic, maybe they weren't the best, maybe they weren't the most intelligent decisions we could have made, but throughout the years, we've learned from that and formulated ideas and learned to live our lives in a way that we're comfortable with, and gained a small measure of contentment with ourselves because we had gone through that. And again, please get in the comments and let me know what y'all think about all this. It was a really important era of the history of Generation X, and I'm interested to know what y'all think, all right? And I'll leave you there with that. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and comment. If you'd like to support the channel by becoming a member, I'll put that link down in the description, or you can head over to the channel page and become a member that way. If you'd like to support the channel directly, you can do so by clicking on that super thanks button down there. Or you can head over to Buy Me a Cup of Coffee and buy me a cup of coffee. I'll put that link down in the description too. Thank you very much to those of you who do that. If you're interested in Gen X gear, we got some pretty cool stuff over there at Redbubble. Gen X Thinks and Gen X branded stuff, t-shirts, coffee mugs, stickers, all kinds of cool stuff. But I'll put that link down in the description as well for those of you who are interested. If you can't or don't want to support the channel in any of those ways, you can always do so by sharing these videos on your social media. That helps out one hell of a lot, so thank you very much to those of you who do that. I really do appreciate it. Thank you. And if you have any ideas for future episodes of Gen X Thinks, thank you, Kalish Matriarch, for this one. Please put those down in the comments. Or you can email us, and the email is genxthinks@gmail.com. And as always, stay frosty, Gen X, and I'll see you on the next one.